I'm going to just start that right now, and then I will turn it over to Dr. Copeland.
Okay, hello everybody. I'm Dr. Vicky Copeland, and again, I'm one of the medical directors for United Healthcare Community Plan. And as you may know, we have several lines of business throughout the state of Arizona. And so we care for people and provide healthcare for people through our main Medicaid or access plan, which is the ACC or Complete Care Plan. And then we also have a health plan with the Department of Economic Security through the DD, the Division of Disabilities Health Plan. And then we have a long-term care health plan. And that is usually for people who are elderly or have some other physical disability and are not under the age of 21. And so we do care for a lot of people. And I, again, just want to welcome everybody. And we can go to the next slide, Dawn. Again, I'm not really sure who my audience is tonight. If we have people who work for Special Olympics Arizona, if we have some athletes, coaches, some family, and some people in our community who support Special Olympics and the athletes. But anyway, I do appreciate the opportunity to be here today and to get to speak with all of you. And what I'm going to be speaking about is COVID-19 and the importance of vaccination. And so if you don't know, COVID-19 is an acronym, like an abbreviation, and it really means corona with the CO, virus with the VI, and disease with the D, that started in 2019. And so a lot of people weren't really sure when it first started where that name came from, but that's where it is. And it is spread through close contact from person to person. And so that's why it's so important to be across the room, or 6 feet away. And it's spread through respiratory droplets. Next slide, please. People that get COVID-19 can have symptoms like a lot of other viruses. And you can get a cough, you can have shortness of breath, you can have fever or chills, muscle pains, headaches, sore throat. And one of the symptoms that a lot of people have heard about is that you can lose your taste or smell, and you can have abdominal pain. Sure, if there's questions coming in, I'm happy to answer them. It might be easier if we do it at the end, but we're a small group, and so if we do want to break for questions, then I'm okay with that too. Whatever works out the best. So if you track the questions and you think I should answer one right then just jump in and let me know. Otherwise, we'll wait. Okay, next slide. So what makes you at risk for COVID-19? There can be several things. And so people that are significantly overweight, or what we have called class 3 obesity, with a high body mass index, people that are immunocompromised and they're being treated maybe for cancer or for transplant, or they have HIV, people that are over the age of 65, and people that live in long-term care facilities or in a group home where there's other people living that aren't from the same household, but they are living there together now. People that have chronic health conditions and they might have a problem with their heart or their lungs or their liver, or have some diabetes. People that are pregnant, and people who have intellectual disabilities or moderate to severe developmental disorders. And so there's a lot of people who are at risk for this virus infection. Next slide. What can we do to prevent it? Well, it's the same thing that all of us really have been doing. And that's really the most important thing, is, again, to keep doing what we're doing. So wash your hands, use soap and water. If you don't have access to soap and water, then it's okay to use a hand sanitizer. Avoid close contact and keep, at least 6 feet between you and other people. And as we're talking about that, especially if those people are not fully vaccinated, continue to wear your mask. And again, keep your nose and your mouth covered. And if you do cough or sneeze, then go ahead and cover your mouth and your nose both, because, germs, respiratory droplets can fly out of both of those. Get vaccinated if you're eligible. And again, sometimes this is important for yourself because you might be higher risk, but it's also important for your loved ones that maybe can't get the vaccine for whatever reason or haven't been able to get it yet. Next slide. So now we'll get right into the information about the vaccines. And I'm not planning to go through this in full detail, but I wanted to put it on here so that people had the information if they wanted to. But Pfizer is one of the vaccines. It's 95% effective, which is, very high for a vaccine. It is approved for people who are 16 and older. It's the one where the amount of time between the 2 doses is a little bit shorter, so it's 21 days. It is an mRNA vaccine, and it does not contain eggs, preservatives, or latex, which is some of the things that people worry about with other vaccines. It was tested in people with other from all racial and ethnic groups, although not nearly as much, as we would like to see. 81.9% of the population was white, and in that, only 2% identified as Hispanic or Latino, and only 4.4% African American. And so, that is a question that a lot of people ask about the testing. It was also tested in people who had what we call comorbidities, or other health conditions that put them at high risk, like obesity, diabetes, and pulmonary disease. But oftentimes vaccines are not tested in people with disabilities. And there's a number of reasons for that, but most of it has to do with what we call the institutional review boards, or IRBs, do not want to approve that because in the past, things were tested or performed upon people with disabilities and without really their permission and without giving good information and allowing people to make informed choices. And so people often again ask, well, has this been tested in people with disabilities? And the answer is usually no. At this point, though, the vaccines have been given to lots of people with disabilities. And so that's important to know too. Next slide. The Moderna vaccine is very, very similar in the technology and the information. And so I'm not going to read through it. It's only slightly less effective. It is available and approved for people who are 18 and older, although again, both of these vaccines are being looked at for people who are younger than that. And we're hoping, over the next several months to a year that we do find out that enough younger people have been studied and that it gets approved, but at this point it is not approved for younger people. It is 28 days apart. And again, I want to emphasize that it's important if you get the first vaccine, unless you have a really serious reaction, you should get the second vaccine. It is not nearly as effective by just having the first vaccine. And so we do want to emphasize that people show up and get their second dose. It also does not contain eggs, preservatives, or latex. It was studied in, again, a slightly broader group of people, meaning that 20% were Hispanic or Latino, and 9.7% were African American. There were, again, people who had other health conditions that were studied. This one also was given to a lot of people who had high occupational risk, they recruited about 25% of healthcare workers. And part of that has to do with, again, the way that it is delivered in a frozen way. Next slide. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine you may have heard quite a bit about in the past week or two because it has been put on hold. And so I'll get to that in just a second. It is 66.3% effective. And so a lot of people say, well, then why would I want this vaccine when the other two vaccines are more than 90% effective? And the reason is that with this vaccine, number one, it prevents all serious infections. So it has had great efficacy against preventing serious infections. And that's really what we want, right? I mean, a lot of us can handle getting a little cold or a little viral infection, but we most certainly do not want to end up seriously ill in a hospital or on a ventilator. And it is, again, great at preventing serious infections. The other reason people liked it is it's only one dose. And so they don't have to return for the second dose. It's much more convenient. And it's much more available to just your regular doctor or healthcare provider. It doesn't come in these gigantic doses. And again, it was great for just regular doctors' offices, providers' offices. And so people really like the convenience. But over the past several months, there have been 6 reported serious blood clots. And so when that was discovered and reported, then they put this on hold so that they can do a little bit more investigation into finding out, is that something that we really need to be concerned about? Is there something specific about those women who got those blood clots that maybe we need to be more careful in a certain subset of population or people with a certain risk factor? And so hopefully we'll be finding that out soon. And again, what we really want to emphasize is that there were still thousands and thousands of people who did receive this vaccine without having any serious complications. And so we just really don't want people to get afraid of getting this vaccine or any others at this point. And this one was the one that was most widely tested in different races and ethnicities. You can see 17% were Black or African American, 8.3% were American Indian or Alaskan Native, and there were 54% or 52% that identified as Hispanic or Latino. And so that's important, again, for a number of different populations. Next slide. Important with this vaccine, all the formulations, they're not live viruses. And so there is no way you can get coronavirus from getting this vaccine. And so that's very important. Again, people can get side effects and people can feel kind of crummy, but it's not because you got the virus. And so the side effects, again, may make you feel yucky, make you feel bad. But you can get pain in the arm around the site or even swelling and redness. You can feel tired. You can have headaches. You can have body aches, chills, possible fever, although that's not nearly as likely, possible nausea. And these symptoms should go away within the first 24 to 48 hours. And so if it starts to last longer than that, especially if it goes past 72 hours, then that's when you should really talk to your doctor or your provider and find out what's going on, because that's likely to be the sign of something else and not the vaccine. And it should not give you a cough or difficulty breathing, because again, that is not consistent with the vaccine. Next slide. Who shouldn't get the vaccine? Again, there's not very many people who shouldn't get the vaccine. It may have more to do with timing than anything else. And so there's very, very few exclusions to the vaccine. But a person who's recently been exposed or infected should not get the vaccine. You should wait until you've cleared the virus or you've tested negative. People who have gotten monoclonal antibody treatment actually for COVID-19 in the last 90 days should wait for 90 days, but then they should get vaccinated. And again, people who have had the virus should wait, but then they also should get vaccinated. If you had an actual severe allergic reaction to the COVID-19 vaccine, not other vaccines, but to the COVID-19 vaccine, and it was severe, then you should not get the second one. But the number of people that have been told not to get the second vaccine because of that is very, very small. And if you've recently had another vaccine, let's just say you got your Tdap or tetanus vaccine or your MMR vaccine, or even your flu shot during the flu season, then you should wait before you get the COVID-19 vaccine. And for most of them, it's about 2 weeks. But again, you should ask your provider how long you should wait. Next slide. I'm going to go through some facts and some myths about COVID-19, just because there's been a number of things out in the news and people are asking questions, and a lot of times, again, they're legitimate questions. People want to know, or they hear something from a friend and they're just not sure about it. And so one of the things we hear is that these vaccines were rushed, that people, that they weren't properly studied and they were rushed to the market. And so that could mean that they're not safe. Well, these were studied in tens of thousands of participants before they got emergency use authorization. And they only got emergency use authorization because they met the safety, effectiveness, and manufacturing quality standards. And so, again, the technology, when we talk about the mRNA or the viral vector technology, that has been studied for years. And it's been studied in treating cancers and many other things. And so, again, even though maybe it felt rushed because people weren't aware of this scientific research going on behind the scenes, they really have not been. If you get a COVID-19 viral test for the actual virus, you will not test positive because you've had a vaccine. But you might test positive for antibodies. So if your doctor's office or the urgent care that you go to is only testing for antibodies, then again, you potentially could test positive, meaning that, again, you've got some immunity. But if they're testing the actual PCR test for the virus itself, you will not test positive because you've had the vaccine. There's a rumor out there, or a concern, that COVID-19 could alter your DNA, that it's altering your genetic material. And again, that's not accurate. The mRNA vaccine does teach your own cells to make a protein that triggers an immune response, but it does not alter your personal genetic material. And some people have raised concerns about problems with pregnancy or fertility, and they've wondered if it's safe to get, either if they're planning to get pregnant or if they are pregnant. And so far, again, there's no evidence that it can cause problems with either of those things. Next slide. Again, some people say, well, I don't want to get the vaccine because it's not 100% perfect. And you're right, it's not. So, if we look at the statistics, 5 out of 100 people, so 95% effective, 5 out of 100 people could potentially get it. But again, it prevents most infections, so 95 people, and it prevents all serious infections. And so that's really the important part, is that, you're right, things are not 100% perfect, and we aren't there yet. But with Moderna and Pfizer, they're really good. And Janssen, again, with only one shot, prevents 2/3 of the infections and all serious infections that we're aware of. And so if that gets put back out on the market again, then, you know, people should try to receive it. And the advice right now is, you know, to get the vaccine that's available to you, not to wait around and try to pick or choose which one you get, but to get the one that's available to you. Somebody had asked a question and had sent it in ahead of time. And so I do have a little bit more information, but just for the slide purposes, COVID-19 vaccine does offer protection against variants. And the reason is because, again, we're looking at the M or the spike protein. And so we know that it is effective. We just don't know how effective. So if it was 95% effective initially, we don't know, you know, is it still 95% effective or is it a little less effective? We don't know, but it still is showing that it is effective. And right now, it's suspected that people may need to have a booster shot. We just don't know when that's going to be, if it's going to be annual, like the flu vaccine, or a little more frequently. But a lot of it's going to depend, again, on how much we can suppress the virus by using our good techniques of hand washing. And so a booster shot is something where in your body, you already are immune. So you've already gotten the vaccine once, and then you wait a while and you get another vaccine. And because your body's seen that before, it's seen that virus or that vaccine before, then it reacts faster and it boosts your immunity. And so it helps, again, to remind your body that you need to respond against this infection. Next slide. So there are some other myths out there, and they're a little bit different, but some people may have heard about them. And so some people have heard maybe that the COVID-19 vaccine implants a microchip or has a 5G in it, or some other type of transducer, and it's tracking people and it's tracking their personal information. And this really, again, is not true. There was an interview done with Bill Gates, and he was talking about being able to track people who have gotten the vaccine, but not by implanting them with anything. And so it kind of got picked up as a news story in a you know, kind of not a truthful way. And I don't know if somebody made a mistake or if it was intentional, but then it kind of got spread around. And so some people have been worried about that, but that does not happen. And also people have been concerned if they used fetal cells or fetal cell lines in the development or production of the vaccines. And Pfizer and Moderna do not do that. And so that's another thing that if that was a concern for you, we hope that that wouldn't keep you from getting the vaccine. And then lastly, I just want to again acknowledge that there are a lot of people who have been concerned about getting the vaccine because they feel like, you know, they're a person of color, Black, Indigenous, or a person with disabilities, and that they in the past or their communities have been experimented upon or not treated fairly. And with this vaccine, again, I really want to try to allay those fears. You know, I recognize them and understand the past and how hurtful and painful it can be. But in this case, I don't think that this is something to be concerned about with this. And in our state of Arizona, people can get the vaccine regardless of immigration status. And that is a federal law. And so we really do want all people getting the vaccine. I mean, we want to protect all people, right? And people who are undocumented deserve to be protected against the virus, but also that helps to protect our whole community. And so if we have an entire group of people who are not getting vaccinated because they're afraid, then that's putting themselves at risk as well as the rest of our community, right? Because we live and we work and we play with people, we go to school with people, and we all need to be protected. Next paragraph, or sorry, next slide. So vaccines should not cost you anything, and you should not be billed. And so if you get this at an urgent care, at a vaccine site, at your doctor's office, you should not get billed either for the administration of the vaccine or for the actual vaccine. And if your provider or the urgent care does another service, right? They see you, they look at your ears and your nose and listen to your heart, and there was a reason for that, then they can bill you for those services. But to actually get the vaccine, you should not be billed. And they may collect insurance information from you about your health plan, because again, they may bill your health plan for it, but there should be no cost that comes back to you. And providers right now are required to report the vaccines to the state through a system called ACIS, which is the Arizona State Immunization Registry. And that is, again, because the federal government is asking for everybody to be tracked for the purposes of knowing how many vaccines we give and how many people are vaccinated as a public health emergency. Again, not as an immigration status check or anything else, but because again, this is a public health emergency that's killed, more than 500,000 people. We want people to be aware of fraud. There have been some weird schemes out there where somebody calls or texts and says, I can prioritize you. If you pay me this amount of money right now, send me your debit card or send me it on PayPal, then we can prioritize you and get you in for a vaccine. And that's fraud. That should not happen. And that's not true. Next slide. We're almost at the end, and so then we can go for questions, but I wanted to put this slide in here. This is the Arizona Department of Health's homepage for COVID-19. And even though it's small, you can see right by the picture of the virus that there's a link for vaccine registration. There's a link for find vaccine, and there's the data dashboard. And there's a lot of really good information there if you wanted to know how many people have gotten the infection, how many people are hospitalized, how many people are in the intensive care unit, or even better now, how many people are vaccinated. And so there's some really good information there. And then right next to that is the link to the school dashboard. And so if you want to see more information about the schools and how the virus might be affecting them. Next slide. So this is my closing slide, because I really want to remind you that as important as I think the vaccine is, and as hopeful as I am that people will get the vaccine, that it's still super important to wash your hands with soap and water, to avoid close contact. If you're in a household where everybody's been vaccinated, or you have family over and everybody's been vaccinated, that's great. But if it's a mixed company, then we really need to keep that distance still. We need to continue to wear our masks, especially out in public, and cover your mouth and nose if you sneeze or cough. And again, if you can get the vaccine, and in Arizona, everybody who's 16 and older is eligible for the vaccine, please get it and then get the second one. I think that's it, Dawn.
Thank you so much, Dr. Copeland. I know we had a few questions that came in the chat, so I think I'll start there and I'll read them.
Okay, great.
If anyone has any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or you can also unmute yourself and ask. We had someone said, I got the vaccine, I got the second dose. What are the side effects of Pfizer? On my legs, I saw little dots. Is that part of the side effects?
And I guess I would have to ask, how long after you got the vaccine? We would not expect you to have little dots. That's not one of the side effects that I'm aware of. And so there is something called the VAERS, VAERS, our Vaccine Adverse Effect Reporting System. And so if you wanted to report it so that people knew that happened to you in the studies, you can report it, but that's not a side effect that I'm familiar with or have heard of.
And then will the shots eventually be available through your doctor, like the flu shot, if this does become something that we need yearly?
Yes, and that is definitely the goal. And again, that was one of the advantages of Pfizer, was that it could be made available to your regular doctor, your pediatrician, your internist, your family doctor, and that it would be more available. But yes, that's the plan.
And then kind of along the same lines as that, someone just asked if you could explain what is a booster shot?
Okay. I think I answered that because I saw it pop up in the chat during the talk, but just in case somebody didn't hear it, a booster shot is something that helps to boost your immunity. And so when we get, like when we're little kids and we get our tetanus and diphtheria vaccine, we have to go back several times to get a booster shot. And that helps to keep our immune system strong and knowing what that infection is, so that if it sees it again, it can react more quickly. And so with the COVID-19 vaccine, we get the first one and our body says, hey, I don't recognize that. That is, that's a foreign thing to me, and it reacts. And then we go back in 21 or 28 days and we get the second one. And then our body says, hey, wait a minute, I saw you before and I didn't like you the first time and I don't like you again. And so now it really ramps up and it says, okay, now I'm ready. But, some time goes by and, maybe 6 months or a year or something goes by and now I don't remember you nearly as well. And so then we're going to get a booster shot, and that's going to remind me, oh, wait a minute, I remember why I didn't like you, and now I'm ready for you again. And so that's how booster shots work.
Thank you. And then someone received the Moderna vaccine, both of them, had no side effects, but sore arms both times. And then someone else in the family had Pfizer and they were sick with flu-like symptoms after the second shot. The more symptoms you have, the better your immune system is working. So does this mean the person that received Moderna was really lucky, or does this mean that her immune system isn't working that good?
Probably means that they're really lucky. So we know that, we do know that, like you said, that if your body reacts strongly to it, that is your immune system working and responding. And but there's also no good study that says the people that responded the worst, had the worst side effects, end up being more immune than the people who had almost no side effects. Some of it's a little bit age dependent. And so sometimes we think that the older people have less side effects than some younger people. But it also can be if a person was exposed initially to coronavirus, and even if they had an asymptomatic infection, Then when they get the booster, they might respond, or the vaccine, they might respond a little bit more strongly. But again, even if you have no symptoms at all and you're young, we still feel that the body is responding and you are immune, and that it is working.
And then this probably kind of was addressed already, but I'm just going to answer or read the question again, just in case. Do both Moderna and Pfizer stop asymptomatic spread? I'm concerned because I have a 16-month-old grandson and I wouldn't want him to catch it.
So that's a really good question. And so the answer is yes, probably, but we don't have good information for how much. And so we do know that so when it first came out, nobody was quite sure, right? People thought, oh, well, you might still be an asymptomatic carrier and you should still be careful. But the more information that we get on it, the more we realize that it really is preventing asymptomatic spread. But we don't have good information on the numbers. And so we are still recommending that people use, masks and hand washing and distancing. And so, it's a little bit hard when you're with a baby and you're in the same household to continue to do that. And so at this point, again, if you're in the same household, people really aren't recommending that you stay masked around your own family members, especially if everybody who's eligible to be vaccinated is vaccinated. But if you're in a different household, then it might. I almost made it. We're having work done on our house. And I asked them to be done early, and they're still working, and they must be cleaning up. So sorry about that. But I have two big dogs, in case you can't tell. So anyway, it is a little bit harder to advise about, if you're from different households.
Perfect. And then you brought it up that it's, we need to continue to wear masks, but someone asked, how long do we have to wear the mask?
And that's, again, a difficult question. It's going to, again, depend probably on how quickly we continue to get people immunized. So there's a little bit of concern right now that the people who wanted to get immunized, who were ready to get immunized, have done it. And so getting kind of the rest of the people who might be a little bit more hesitant to get vaccinated, it's gonna take a little bit more work. And so if we start to see spikes in the numbers, which we're seeing a little bit of one right now, but if we start to see spikes, then we're probably going to need to continue to wear masks. And, there's a little bit of question also about variants. And so, again, right now, we think that our vaccines are pretty effective against variants. And it's normal for viruses to mutate. That's what viruses do. And so the fact that we're seeing variants is not a surprise to any doctor or scientist. That's what they do. That's how they survive. But the lower that we can keep the infection rate and the more suppressed we can keep the virus, then the less mutations or variations we're going to see. And so that's another really important reason, again, to try to keep them, to keep the infection as low as we can. And I know people don't like wearing masks. I mean, they're not comfortable, and, they can be hot, and it's getting hot here. And so people really want to get rid of their masks, and I completely understand that. But, we don't want to get sick ourselves if we haven't been vaccinated, and we certainly don't want to get somebody else sick. And so for right now, again, it's really advised that people continue to wear their masks in public.
And and you got a thumbs up on that one. Another question, my mom has gotten quite sick from the flu vaccine, so she's worried about getting the COVID vaccine. Do you have any insight?
A lot of people have been worried about that, right? They've had a reaction to a previous vaccine, whether it's the flu vaccine or some other injection. And we really have not seen a lot of that with the COVID-19 vaccine, and people have been really carefully watching it. And so, at the big immunization sites, if people were worried about that, when you pulled your car in, you got your vaccine, and then they sent people to special waiting areas and really kept an eye on them. And honestly, the most common reaction was anxiety, right? It was that people were nervous that they were going to have a reaction, so they worried about it. But to have like severe reactions, people didn't. And again, I think the most important thing to know going in is that you may have side effects. I mean, I'll be honest, my second vaccine, I did not feel good at all. I spent about 4 hours in bed with the chills and body aches, and I was not comfortable. But within the 24 hours, that had really all gone away. And, for me personally, I felt crummy. I hated the way I felt, but I also knew that it meant I wasn't going to spend a night in a hospital. I wasn't going to end up on a ventilator. And so it is a personal choice. And right now there's no requirements that people get vaccinated. And yet we're really hoping that people, will do it for themselves, but also for their loved ones and for the community.
Perfect. And then I think I went through all of them except one. Can shots be mixed? For example, one from Moderna and then get the second shot from Pfizer?
Highly recommended that they're not. And so, we haven't gotten to a point yet where there's a shortage or where there's a situation that's requiring people to do that. And so there's not enough good information out there to show if that changes the effectiveness. And so again, right now, it's just really recommended that if you got Pfizer the first time, you get Pfizer the second time. If you got Moderna the first time, get Moderna the second time. Eventually, we may have more information on that because, somebody might have gotten Pfizer and then they move. And the location that they move to only has Moderna. And so they end up getting Moderna. But right now it's just really not advised, not because it's going to harm you, right? It's not because we think there's something bad that's going to happen, but it's because we just don't know, will it have the same effectiveness? And so we're really trying again to keep people, keep them healthy and make sure that it's effective as it can be.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Copeland. I don't think I see any other questions in the chat, but if you have any, feel free to put them in the chat, or you can also unmute yourselves and ask any questions. Okay, Jerry, I see you're raising your hand if you want to go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, am I unmuted?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, yeah, I'm in Tucson, and my son's a member of Special Olympics Arizona at the Vail Trailblazers group. He's been in it for, 11 years, because Bob paused the whole year, so really would be year 12 that he is. He's 26. We haven't vaccinated him. We're still on the fence about it. But one of my questions, I do a lot of reading about this. I'm retired, so I got a lot of free time. So One of the questions I actually asked a doctor that I had, that he had just been vaccinated because he was frontline. And the question I asked him is, you had your first shot. I said, how do you know if it's working? And he said, well, the only way is to know what the antibody result is to tell you if it's working. So if somebody's fully vaccinated, are they allowed to go into like a LabCorp and ask for an antibody test to see what the results are? Because that's the telltale if the vaccine is working. And does the insurance company pay for that, or is that something elective that you would have to pay out of pocket?
Thank you for that question. And so you're right. The only way to know if it's really working is if there are antibodies. You're absolutely right. But with this vaccine, because it is so effective and the trials, again, tested things like that in thousands of people, it is not necessary and it's not recommended that you get antibodies tested to be sure that you're immune. And they're continuing to test in the studies and the trials because they are trying to figure out how long people's immunity will last, because they want to know if people are going to need to get that third shot or that booster shot in a year. And so if you went and said to the lab that the only reason that you wanted to get tested was because you wanted to test your immunity from the vaccine, then most likely they would not. Did we lose Jerry?
I think we lost Jerry.
Uh-oh. Okay, well, I'll keep going. And then if he wants to watch the recording, then
Perfect.
he'll have that. But most likely they would not cover the vaccine. I mean, the testing for antibodies, because the testing is really only supposed to be covered for people who are being screened for infection. If, however, your provider or doctor or whoever ordered it and it went to the lab, then I can't say that anybody would actually probably know that that's why it was getting tested or ordered. And so there is a good chance that the test would get done and, and potentially be covered. But again, it's not recommended that people do that. And even for frontline workers, where their risk of exposure is very high, we're not recommending testing with antibodies for immunity after the vaccine.
Awesome. Any other questions? I don't see any more in the chat. Anyone else?
On the slide, I did put some resource information. So if on the very last slide, if people needed some resources, I did put some, and so there's some links in there. But Maria, did you guys have a question?
I think my daughter Lisa does.
Hi.
Hi. So I have a question though. So I have a nephew. He's 18 months. So I was wondering he should get vaccine as well, even though he's a baby. So that's my question for you guys.
Sure. Thank you for that question. So right now we're not vaccinating babies. They're too young and they haven't been studied. And so it's probably going to be, right now we can give vaccine to people who are 16 and older. And so probably what we'll see if it's approved is it'll go down a couple of years, maybe to 14 or to 12-year-olds. And then if necessary, it might go down again a little bit lower. But because babies are not at highest risk for getting coronavirus, and the disease doesn't seem to affect them most of the time nearly as much as it does older people or people with other health problems, we are not giving vaccine to babies.
Okay.
Not yet though, but eventually.
Maybe, right. It'll depend on what the studies show. Right now, again, they're at much more risk for the flu. And so we really do want people to get even babies as young as 6 months to get the influenza vaccine and to get their other vaccines for polio and diphtheria pertussis, and 1-year-olds to get MMR. But for the coronavirus right now, we're not going that young, and I don't know if we will. We'll have to pay attention to the science. So we'll see.
And then one more question just came through. Can our pets get the vaccine?
It's interesting. Not that I'm aware of. I don't think that anybody is vaccinating pets for coronavirus, and I don't think that people think that pets are a source of infection. And so the reason that I'd say it's interesting is because we wanted to have as many people available to give the vaccine, to give injections as we could. And so they've actually recruited some veterinarians to give vaccines at some of the sites because veterinarians are so used to giving injections. And they've recruited dentists and pharmacists and nurses and doctors, so that especially in certain communities where they need more people. But as far as I know, there's no COVID-19 vaccine for animals, and it hasn't been needed yet.
All right. If there are not any other questions, we will let everyone go. But thank you again, Dr. Copeland, for coming on tonight and for providing all of this valuable information. And for those of you that are on, we did record the session and we can send it out to you after. And if it's okay with Dr. Copeland and Dodd, we can also share the PowerPoint slides so you can have that additional information available to you. But thank you both so much for joining us tonight. And thank you everyone for hopping on and asking such wonderful questions. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really do appreciate you guys having me and the opportunity to talk to you. So thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you.
you.
Have
Bye,
a good night,
everybody.
everyone.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.